Welcome, Professor Dutta. It's a great pleasure to have you here at the DLC studios here in Mumbai. A very warm welcome. We are really happy. It's exciting to have you here in this moment. And after the launch of your book, we'll talk about that.
No, thank you very much. And it's an honor and a privilege to be, I'm part of the New York chapter of DLC, and I'm very pleased that out here I'm in the home base in Mumbai.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your new book, The World After COVID? We're all very much intrigued. And if I may also know something about education, you're a guru of education, and I'm in the same field. So we would all love to know what is happening with education in the next near future.
Well, thank you for the question. And believe me, I would myself love to know what's going to happen in the future of education. But we all are trying to, understand what we've gone through first of all, because the last 2 years have been absolutely amazing and unanticipated. If you think about education as a whole, we have been laggards by and large in education using technology. And I think the COVID pandemic really pushed us very hard in terms of going remote and going online. And now as we're coming out of the COVID pandemic, what I'm realizing, what I'm seeing is that there is a tremendous push by many universities to go back to the old normal. So in some sense, back to the future. Okay. And it's not completely clear to me that that's the best way forward. But having said this, the question about what the future will hold for us is an important one for the industry to think about. And we thought about this question about a few months ago. And because we don't have an answer ourselves, we said, why don't we go and talk to people? The leaders in the industry, the business school leaders, business leaders, and try to hear from them what they thought the world will look like after COVID. And the book really is about that. The book, The World After COVID-19, is an attempt to gather the collective wisdom of many leaders around the world. We interviewed around 30 of them. We collected the views of about 20 of them in the book. And I think it just provides a nice summary of what leaders think the future will hold.
I'm intrigued. I'm dying to read the book. And I guess there must be two different tracks for executive education and for normal formal education in the replies of the leaders.
Yes and no. So I think, what you find, because we asked them, how has the pandemic affected you and your business or your universities? And what was interesting was, of course, technology entered in the picture. There's a whole discussion of technology and how technology had become a very important part of, the business models and how they expect technology to continue as an important part of the future. But what struck me, if I look back at the various discussions, was the human element of it, and how some of the leaders had gravitated, pivoted towards a more human and a more humane form of leadership. And this was both in terms of looking after the people, the psychological safety of people, the stress of people in the organization in a much more careful, nuanced manner. But also, I think, which is interesting, is being more aware of their own fragilities as leaders themselves. So, if you're a leader of an organization, you're trying to navigate the organization through a crisis, you have to be strong yourself. But you cannot be strong if you're not aware of some of your own fragilities, your own frailties. So I think what struck me really was how different leaders were taking a much more people-centric approach to the leadership styles, how they were becoming more aware of their own weaknesses and strengths, and how they were trying to balance the stresses that they were facing at a personal level too. Because if they succeeded in doing so, they felt that it was essential to be able to lead their own organization. So I think the human nature of the challenge is something that struck me from the discussions.
Okay, very interesting. I think we've all experienced somehow that something that really was not expected that came out from your book.
Yeah, so I think, for me, the most important message really was that everyone sees a lot of change, but there is no clarity in terms of what change will happen. So there was some change imposed on us in education, whether it's degree or non-degree, whatever kind of education you look at. There was some forced change upon us. But what happens beyond is something which is not fully known. If you think about the impact of technology in general on society, on business, you can think of sort of 3 orders of magnitude of impact. The first order of magnitude, so the first order of impact is simple substitution. So you're doing something by horse carriages, you start traveling by cars. You were communicating by fixed phones, you do it mobile phones. Second order of impact is diffusion. Because the new technology is typically cheaper, easier, better to use, higher quality, people start doing more and more of it. More people have cars, more people have mobile phones, and so on. And the third order of impact is the more interesting one, where you have transformation, where the fundamental ways which you live and work change because the new technology is so widespread. The whole idea of shopping malls and suburbs in the US or West is typically because car ownership is widespread. Similarly, mobile phones have impacted the way we live and work quite strongly. So we come to education, what has happened is, because of COVID, we have had a very rapid acceleration in the first 2 phases. Substitute the classroom for in-person with the remote, and diffusion. Everyone has been forced to do it. It's not a question of choice. Everyone did it. Now the interesting question is transformation. What's going to happen? How will education transform in the future? And I think that's what is interesting, is that no one really has a clear idea what's going to happen. Now, this is quite normal in a sense when you have technology disruption in any industry. People try to discover what the future is going to look like. But what I am concerned about is what I mentioned at the start, is that I see a lot of leaders in universities today or business schools today pushing hard to go back to in-person teaching, go back to where we were 2 years ago. And while I can understand that it's very comforting, you know that model worked, so you know the good strengths of it and so on, I don't see that kind of willingness to experiment and try to see how we can create the future. Even though we don't know exactly what it looks like, let's try and create what kind of different possibilities are there. So if I had to sort of make one suggestion, for leaders in both companies and business schools and universities, is that we have to be much more open to experimentation, much more open to discovery, and to creating new things. Like, for example, Della Leaders Club. It's a new creation, right? You've got to create something. And for creating new things, you need passion. So you don't have the passion, that will not happen. And the passion needs to be across the organization. So I think it's very important that we are able to rekindle that passion inside education, to be able to hold this moment and take advantage of the special moment to transform ourselves.
Wonderful. I cannot agree more on that. And especially here in DLC, where we see the passion of the founder.
Exactly.
And the soundness of the project. So thank you very much. It was really great to have this piece from you, and we look forward to reading your book for sure.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.